Good afternoon. My name is Steve Katz, and we're going to have a panel today that will be discussing artificial intelligence. Can everyone hear me? Artificial intelligence, a variety of funding solutions, and cancer research, and we're going to integrate and define how they're all relevant. My panel consists of Stephen Cohen, a corporate attorney, right in the middle, Sean Coveleski, who is a senior operating officer of an entity called Stand Up for Cancer, and Norm Friedland, who is an attorney who works with novel and unique funding techniques for capital raises. I am a management consultant. I have a firm called Stephen Katz and Associates, Inc. And Stephen Katz and Associates, Inc. works on primarily in the healthcare life science space. We do strategy, we raise capital. I do a very significant amount of technology transfer, proxy fight work. I sit on a number of boards. I'm currently the non-executive chairman of a significant healthcare services company operating in New York City, and have been on a total of 28 boards. I've been a consultant for 39 years, and that's briefly my background. Our first speaker will be Stephen Cohen of Morgan, Lewis & Bockius, who is a corporate attorney that I've known for over 25 years. And rather than provide a short two-sentence introduction, which I like to do, Steve's experience is very extensive. I'm going to ask him to just briefly summarize.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. And thanks for inviting me to speak on this panel. Yeah, I was interested in listening to Mathias' presentation because I invested in a company trying to solve that problem around 15 years ago. Didn't quite work, so hopefully you guys will be more successful. I've been at Morgan Lewis for 35 years. I have a global emerging business and technology practice. I represent a lot of emerging technology and life sciences companies, as well as investors in those companies, both on the private equity side, venture capital side, and the family office side. I do a lot of what I call club deals among family offices, and maybe that'll come up a little bit later. Also have done a lot of deals with David Rose, and some of the things that he's done, really have a lot of respect for him, and the things that he's put together in the past, which gives me a lot of optimism that what he's doing now will do well.
Excellent, excellent. Steve, the first question I want to ask you, and you're
They are now broadcasting you into the other room.
Okay.
Anybody knows what we're seeing.
Okay.
You're going to be talking about AI. So can you tell us a little bit about how AI can potentially have the impact to revolutionize healthcare? We all know that AI is a very current and hot topic. So if you can share with us some of that thinking, that would be very helpful.
Sure. So Steve and I had lunch, I guess early last week, and he asked me that question: how can AI revolutionize healthcare? So of course, what I did was I asked ChatGPT, how can AI revolutionize healthcare?
And I have the proof right here.
That's right. And so really interesting. And like all AI, it's sort of garbage in, garbage out, but I actually thought it gave, 9 really good ideas. So I'd like to share those with you. So the first area is in diagnosis and prediction. So AI algorithms can analyze, medical data, images like X-rays and MRIs to assist in diagnosing disease and accurately, more accurately and quickly. I'm working with one company that has a diagnostic, and it's for UTI infections. So one of the big issues with UTI infections is that, first of all, it takes like 2 days to get the lab test back. And second of all, different types of antibiotics work on different types of infections. So it's a tremendous issue in the marketplace that doctors will just sort of pick one and get people started. They'll get the lab test back. They'll have to figure out what works best. You're 3 days later, and they often change your antibiotic. So this diagnostic company, which I think is going to do amazing, gives real-time results to the doctor, and then they're studying the correlation between different antibiotics and different different attributes of the UTI infection that come up on their diagnostic. I've got another one that I'm working with called SpinTech. They've got these MRI image enhancement technology. And, AI needs the data. And so what this technology is able to do is able to enhance the images so that the AI can read the images better, and that will give the doctor better information. So you can sort of see how these things work in diagnostics. The second area is personalized medicine. J&J is engaged in a really fascinating project with the UK biotech whole genome screening project. So that UK project is screening massive numbers of people in the UK. As you know, they have sort of socialized medicine, so they can get the data. And then what J&J is going to do is work with them to see if people with certain genetic traits or genetic sequencing reacts better or worse to various types of drugs in the J&J pipeline. Really interesting way in which they'll use AI to sort of, manage that data set. The third area is drug discovery itself. Probably talk about that in a little bit, where AI could really streamline the drug discovery process by predicting how different compounds will react to different targets in the body. The fourth way is the way in which AI works in many types of industries, which is operational efficiency, right? AI can optimize certain routine operations, such as scheduling, resource allocation, patient flow, leading to both shorter wait times and better operations. One that I have a bunch of clients that are working on is remote monitoring and telehealth. So AI-powered devices. So you have all these monitoring devices, right? They all feed in to whatever the system is. And then instead of the patient having to monitor it or the doctor having to monitor it, right? AI monitors what the inputs are, right? Whether it's your glucose level, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your whatever it is that they're monitoring, and will then create an alert when there's something outside the normal range. It could alert the person, could alert the family, could alert the doctor. I had one yesterday. A guy came in and was telling me about his product, which is for T1D patients, and it activates when you're driving. So your phone knows when you're driving, right? You have that turned on, and when the person's blood sugar level drops, AI will, if you have a continuous glucose monitoring device on, the AI will read that. If you ignore the beeps, which apparently an incredible number of people do on their automatic glucose monitoring device, it will first give a prompt. If you don't follow the prompt, it will actually contact your family. And there's an incredible actual number of people that ignore their glucose monitoring devices prompts because they're in this state of low blood sugar and they're not thinking properly, right? And so this actually thinks for you, for the patient, right? And starts to take the next actions the patient would take if they were in their sort of right mind because their blood sugar level was. So I thought that was really cool. Predictive analytics. We talk a lot about AI and its ability to look at data sets that have already been created. But the ability of AI then to predict what will happen in future data sets, really interesting.
That's very interesting because the paradigm for AI has been process large amounts of data, perform the analytics, synthesize a conclusion, kind of like a summary statistical accuracy, detect the melanoma for a dermatologist, and all the other issues that you described. And what you're describing with predictive analytics starts to open up the window of how AI can work in much larger biological systems with multiple vectors, multiple objectives, and various interactive activities and synthesize an outcome. So, the predictive analytics, I think, please go on to comment on that. I think that's very relevant.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that we saw that. Think about this application, right? So think about if the world's, health outcomes are loaded into a system, right? Like the CDC or similar system, and that we can see where COVID, infectious disease, future infectious disease outbreaks are occurring in real time based upon hospitals that are giving their input into some sort of global system, and how that might be able to avoid another pandemic with the AI system being a global health, with a global health AI system, which doesn't yet exist, but I presume it will at some point, right? Being able to map out where people are getting infectious diseases and then how it spreads could be, you know, really groundbreaking, you know, for humanity.
Well, I think I want to ask you a different question, but in kind of a recap and summary, clearly AI is going to help us beam in on drug development more quickly and hopefully more cost effectively, because everything that we're doing in drug development is shortening the timeline, but increasing costs dramatically. So hopefully this will be a transition point. The other question I want to ask is, what medical, ethical, regulatory challenges do you see that will restrict AI from becoming fully utilized? What are the holdbacks? What are the impediments?
So I'll shift from my optimistic hat into my lawyer hat, which can still be optimistic, but so, you know, look, data privacy and security is obviously a tremendous issue. You know, healthcare data is sensitive. We want to protect patient confidentiality, right? That's a good thing. The collection and use of AI requires access to large data sets. It raises concerns about the unauthorized access, right? You know, you might say you're supposed to do it on a blinded basis, but if J&J is going to have access to my genetic material, right, and is going to be able to use that, it's got access to my genetic material, right? And it can do maybe something else, right? Someone could hack into the system and get access to that kind of information. Data breaches become significant. Potential misuse of health information. So that's one thing that really concerns me. You know, the healthcare industry is a highly regulated industry. We have HIPAA in the US, we have GDPR in Europe. You know, these things can be complex. AI is moving fast, regulations move slow, right? So will regulations keep up, you know, with the progress that's been making in terms of, you know, legal and ethical accountability for the use of AI? And yeah, informed consent goes a long way in a lot of areas, but can we really give our informed consent? Are we really informed, right? Are we really informed about what AI is going to use this data for once it has it? And I'm concerned that no, right? I think the answer is no. But how can we get there? Can we get there? I think we can over time. But you know, how do we get there? There's also a garbage in, garbage out aspect to AI, right? So it's always really important that AI makes stuff up, right? So AI takes it generally learns from its next best piece of data. And if there isn't a really good piece of data, it takes the next best thing to good, which is often wrong, right? And in healthcare, that's really important, right? So if AI grasps something that's not actually accurate, it was just the next best thing, will it come up with the exact wrong outcome in the end? That's something that I'm concerned about from an ethical and a legal point of view. And the last thing I wanted to mention are biases and discrimination, right? So AI, if the data starts out a little biased, right? Women react differently than men. You know, people of color react differently than white people, right? Asian people react differently than either of them, right? What happened? How is AI going to be able to figure this out, right? Is AI going to accentuate these biases rather than correct for these biases? And I think that's an ethical issue that we have to think about as we look at these data.
Forgive me for interrupting, but it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's exactly where AI is theoretically supposed to be moving from, when it goes from simplex tasking to multiple variables tasking, building in a whole bunch of variable considerations for a product, and then building in another set of parameters like, okay, is it Asian, Caucasian, white, etc. I think that's exactly where AI is trying to go. It's where it should be going. It's what its capabilities can be harnessed to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah, and will that lead to more equal treatment or more unequal treatment? I don't know where it would go, right? But hopefully, you're right. We can harness that information to lead to more equal treatment. But that requires having equal data sets, right?
Fair enough. Look, I think that AI's got a lot of promise. We read every day, reading in the newspapers, issues associated with AI, particularly privacy, abuse. We've talked about regulatory. So I think this is a real boon to development, but clearly needs to be buttoned up.
Agreed. Thank you.
How do you work with family offices on club deals or other deal structures to facilitate family offices participating in healthcare and technology, private equity, and venture investments? You touched on that in your practice earlier.
Yeah. So, and look, a lot different family offices have different strategies and invest different ways. If anyone ever wants to see what's on my desk, feel free to give me your card, and I have this thing about emerging companies that are promising that are on my desk. So I'm always happy to share those things. But it's one of the differences between, I think, family offices and a venture capital firm. So I was on a venture capital panel last week, and there's a VC focuses on AI and healthcare type investments. And he said he got, over 100 investments over the summer that started with, my company will use AI to transform the future of healthcare. Over 100 just this summer, right? So it's very hard for family offices sometimes to sift through, some of that information and figure out what's the best deals. A lot of the deals that I do with the family offices I work with, they either invest in private equity or venture capital firms, and then I'll work with them on co-investment type deals, or they put together deals, with, I'll call them friends and family, and family office. It might be two family offices. It might just be this person in the family or that person. And we'll put something together that allows them to sort of invest together and do follow-ons together and participate in these various promising companies, often that are of interest to one family member, to some family member, right? So a lot of the things in healthcare and family office healthcare are motivated by someone in the family had this issue, right? And that's really important. That's a really important investment thesis. So I always try and gather that information so I can get the right, opportunities to the right offices.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very, very much. We're going to have our second speaker, Sean Coveleski. Sean is Executive Vice President of Development for Stand Up to Cancer. And Stand Up to Cancer's mission is to create awareness and fund cancer research with the objective of curing cancer for all patients. His responsibilities are very broad, and his primary focus is funding and entering into appropriate strategic relationships with other entities to further the foundation's objectives. Sean, would you give us a little bit more of a definition of some specificity so that we can understand those general words, what you're really doing on a day-to-day basis, hands-on, what those ventures are like, what areas of cancer you target, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone. And I know there's a number in this room that have joined the executive committee that's chaired by Marty and Norm. So this is a perfect timing that the goal of this executive committee is we are going to launch a new project, an AI-focused cancer research project at the end of this year with this group.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah, I think that's why I'm on the panel. But as far as this group, I think, it's a large organization. We've been around for 16 years. We're funded out of LA, out of the entertainment industry. Many of you may have seen some of the first on TV telecasts with a lot of celebrities. It's Katie Couric is one of our founders, and Sherry Lansing. So it was a group of entertainment leaders that came together that wanted to raise some money and funds and push a collaborative team research model. So that was very new about 16 years ago, where you have all these different cancer centers that are kind of working in isolation. So funding from us required collaboration. So that's kind of how we got our start. That's a model that's well adopted now, but that is kind of where we feel like we kind of pioneered and pushed the boundaries in cancer research. So Stand Up to Cancer, we research all cancers. So we've researched over 84% of all cancers. So we're not cancer restricted or specific. For this group, kind of how we work with family offices is about there's two kind of ways, and Norm's going to touch on one of those here in a moment. But traditionally, and Stephen highlighted this, family offices are often motivated by someone in the family that has that connection to healthcare. So we work with families to design research projects. So say there's a history of breast cancer or colorectal cancer or pancreatic in the family wants to come together. It's a philanthropic priority of theirs. We will design a project that's multi-institutional. We can put together projects and awards from a few $100,000 to 20 million. And these are multi-year projects that bring in the leading cancer research centers. So that from a traditional sense, that's one way we've worked with some large family offices that really have been affected by cancer. And then I think for this group with the investor side and that are either strategic investors or involved with different pharma, biotech, industry organizations. Norm's going to highlight that, but we have a way through our model to actually give these really promising companies that are starting to try to break into the different markets. We can give them visibility and actually better peer review from our volunteer network. So we have a number of Nobel laureates that serve on our advisory committee. How our model is set up is we actually give better peer review than you can pay for on the market. So why do we do it, right? That's the question, because we want to help these companies that are really focused on serving a certain populations that might not receive traditional funding based on how research is set up in the US. So I'm happy to elaborate, but in my role, all sorts of corporate partnerships, individual family office relationships, and then industry partners as well. We have a place to engage with all of those.
So in a certain sense, you're handling a research project from concept, conceptualization, early indication, so on and so forth. So in a certain way, you're like a mini NIH. It may not be a good analogy, but you're like handling from the inception because you've got an advisory board or an advisory panel of experts. So if someone says, I've got a $10 million contribution to make, but a family member had XYZ cancer, we'd like you to develop a development program that will focus on that. So would that simplistically illustrate?
Exactly right. And I think the why, why stand up is when the funder comes, they're part of the process from the building and design of the project all the way through to the end. So these are multi-year projects. We do in-person semi-annual reviews of the teams. We're not a funder that just says, we loved your idea, here's a bunch of money, good luck. We hold them to their aims. Our network makes sure that those dollars are being stretched and they're accomplishing those aims. We're known for pulling funding. So if you have a good idea and it doesn't pan out after a few years, we'll pull funding and redirect those projects with those teams. So we were very hands-on. And I think that's what family offices like. They know that they're seeing the progress and they're knowing their money is being stretched.
You're close to the program. So,
Yep.
So that's a question. Are you putting up capital or funds that belong to Stand Up to Cancer side by side with a contribution? Or are you just managing those funds? Or are you investing your own funds side by side on an existing program or collaboratively with another partner?
That's a great question. It depends on the project. Our network, we bring in, if we feel like American Lung Association has a similar goal, we also can fold them in to match dollars. So it can be, we always try to leverage dollars. It just depends on the project and the aims.
So you're very strategic. You look for partners, you look for capital sharing, additional capital capability.
Absolutely.
So on and so forth. Excellent. Now, do you have opportunities to offer impact investors? Could you describe how that could work?
Sure. Yeah. No. So we're in the process of finalizing that as we speak, of setting up our impact fund. So in the next few months, we'll actually have that opportunity as well. So this is a new initiative for Stand Up.
And for the benefit of the audience that may not know the exact definition of impact funding,
Yep.
could you just enunciate on how that would work a little bit so you can acquaint?
Sure. So we're in the, depending how our fund is going to look, but essentially we are going to look at opportunities with these smaller companies for an investment standpoint. We're looking at a fund of we're thinking starting off around 50 million with $1 million minimum investments. And basically we will identify these companies, many of which, we've seen through this group, through Marty's group.
Are we passing the plate after you speak?
Yeah, no, Marty locked the door. So before we go, yeah, he's going to pass around a collection plate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have some plants in the audience as well. So, we'll talk more, I think, about that on the next, in the coming presentations.
Excellent, excellent. I know that the way we worked it out is your presentation and Norm's presentation are somewhat integrated. Obviously, Steve's discussions and the AI are obviously intertwined well. So Norm, perhaps you'll speak now and give us a little bit more information. Norm Friedland is the co-founder of FullSky Partners, which is a national organization and advisory firm working across the country, whose focus is applying mission funding to life science healthcare solutions. Like anything else, AI is creeping its way into that matrix as well. Norm is the co-chair of the executive committee of Stand Up to Cancer, as Sean mentioned a moment ago. He is also a Root Tilden Scholar from NYU Law School and started his career with a very prominent law firm. I think we all recognize the name Cravat, Swain and Moore. So Norm, please go into a bit of detail and explain to us what mission funding is, how it works, its relevancy, what are the mechanics at a high level, so the audience can embrace what it is that you do.
Thank you, Steve. And Marty, thank you. Sean, Steve, thanks for being on the panel. So a smart person once told me that a presentation of 5 or 10 minutes, people can only understand 3 or 4 points. So I'm going to make 3 or 4 points. The first point is that disease doesn't look at your FICO score. You're a master of the universe. You're a successful real estate, commodity trader, oil trader, hedge fund, PE person. If disease comes after you, if it comes after your family, there's a legal phrase called SOL, and that's what you're looking at. So the point of mission funding is to look at the 15,000 diseases that we know of which there are only 500 therapeutics, and trying to figure out how to get the right kind of funding so those diseases can go from bench to bedside. And I've got a personal example. Because of HIPAA, I can't identify the person, but I've been married to her for 50 years. She had a cancer diagnosis, went to Sloan Kettering, and you don't get better than Sloan Kettering, but they weren't really sure what to do. And I just started working in the mission funding space, and was working with a very early stage company that was looking at RNA analysis of tumors. And I said, look, can you take a look at the RNA of her tumor and tell us what's going on? And they said, yes. And I brought the information to Sloan Kettering, and they said, what is this? And I said, well, this is her RNA. And they said, oh, we've never seen this before. We're going to get her into a clinical trial for another type of cancer, because the RNA matched that cancer profile. And that was 6 years ago. She got to dance at our son's wedding. And but that's the power of mission funding. And that's really the leverage that we want to bring to Stand Up to Cancer, because they've got a tremendous presence in the cancer space, expertise. And what we're talking about in mission funding is kind of a variation of what Steve talked about. You've got a family office that has assets. Some of those assets are endowment assets. Some of those assets are philanthropic assets. Typically, the philanthropic assets go out as grants. Fine. You're writing a check to a doctor, to a researcher, to a lab, to write a paper, to do some studies, to have a conference. What's the impact? The impact is the sound of one hand clapping. At scale, if we can mobilize these philanthropic assets through a lens of Stand Up to Cancer. We're now talking about at scale amounts. We're talking about deploying those philanthropic assets, which can be done with an IRS approved program that Steve's partners know a lot about, called program related investments. And we can deliver serious funding to these companies for this mission without regard to ROI, because that's the real, that's the real blockage. You've got all this AI stuff going on. You're going to be able to diagnose people. You're going to be able to treat people. The question is, who's going to get it? If you can't afford it and you can't get it, then we might as well be investing in pitchforks, because this society is not going to tolerate a system where only the rich people can be saved from disease. So that's kind of point number one, or point number two, or point number three.
Okay, so you've touched on the second question I wanted to ask to some extent, but maybe you can just polish off the edges a little bit. So how would mission funding and Stand Up to Cancer integrate and work together? You've touched on a lot of the pieces without giving it a label. Can you just give us a minute or two on pull it together, how it would work?
Sure. So one of the case studies that we can look at, and the beauty is we don't have to invent the wheel, is what cystic fibrosis did with Vertex. Cystic fibrosis found a company, or they found a technology that they thought could cure cystic fibrosis. They raised some money. They gave it to a company called Vertex. Vertex took that money, created a product, and the result of that product was a $3 billion payment to cystic fibrosis. Okay. And by the way, they shortchanged themselves by about $2 billion, but that's a different story. But now you've got an organization like cystic fibrosis that now has the cash to do its mission. And that's really the model that we're creating for Stand Up to Cancer.
Yeah, and or maybe I can also kind of add some additional background to that. So that's the point that I think is not very well known, is that through a PRI from a private foundation, it can be invested, it can be sent to these companies that are really making a strong impact for that population, many of which will never be able to be profitable because of the small subset, but it still impacts 5, 10, 15,000, pediatric patients a year. So typical investing is never going to touch that because there's no return there. Well, through this PRI structure, so it's from the foundation to the company, we can then come in and help leverage those funds through our research model. So the company will run the research for the company, give them better peer review, put them on a national stage. This model exists. We do this with J&J, we do this with Merck, we do this AZ. I think where Norm is, and that's been part of our cornerstone of our funding since the beginning of Stand Up. But what Norm's saying, for these companies that are smaller, that are really serving a population that needs it, we can come in and help amplify and those dollars and stretch those dollars.
I'd like to just give one other example, if I may. So I was working with a group, and the family offices wanted to use $5 million to support type 1 diabetes, right? And so the way we structured that program-related investment is they did $100,000 grants to 20 companies. So that was 2 million of it. And the requirement was that they had to cooperate and share their information with each other. And then the $3 million of it went to invest in the best of those 20 companies. So that was able to qualify from the foundation from a legal point of view. So hopefully they will make an impact and also be able to get some return back so that they can perpetuate their mission.
So Steve, I think the last point is that we're in the nuclear winter for life science investing. There is no money. There's no VC money. There's no IPO money. There's no private equity money. So what you're looking at are 1,000 companies that have created solutions that were science fiction 5 years ago. that were unimaginable 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, those solutions are going to make what we have today look trivial. But these companies are all going to fall into what is called, you've heard of it, the valley of death, because there just is no investment capital that's there. And so the only choice that we have as a society, the only choice we have as wealth management stewards is to figure out how to tap in to a couple of $100 billion of these philanthropic assets and do it effectively, do it smartly, do it with partners like Stand Up to Cancer. And these solutions are there for probably the cost of less than the sticker on the rearview mirror of a NASCAR. I mean, we're not talking about huge amounts.
That's not a cheap item, by the way.
Oh, really? Yeah, right. No, I mean, the dollars we're talking about that these companies are looking for. And Marcel, did I get that right? I mean, the number you're looking for is trivial compared to, the disease, the impact on society, on the individual. And so we've got to have that balance. And I think part of the reason we're appreciative to Marty is to give us this forum to let you folks think about this as advisors, as wealth managers, as asset owners, because this is, as I say, this is the dialogue that we need to have. Otherwise, we're talking about investing in pitchforks.
All right, so
There's a question back there.
why don't we take it then, please? Just step up a little bit and speak up so we can all hear you.
Question about investing within just, it's a non-philanthropic.
If you'll hang on a moment, I'm about to ask Norm one last question about that. And if we don't answer it, please, I'll ask you to raise the question again. So Norm, apropos to that and apropos to what my last question was going to be is, how does mission funding interact with, work with high net worth individuals, family offices, and similar entities? How does that synergy get done? What does that relationship look like?
Well, part of it is the dialogue that we're having today. Part of it is we talk to legal and wealth advisors and socialize about the fact that these philanthropic assets can, under IRS regulations, under state fiduciary regulations, be deployed to these for-profit companies. And then we identify the companies and the opportunities for the impact. And so, I would urge you to come and talk to Steve as an expert in this space, Steve's law firm. We're happy to talk to you. We don't provide legal advice. We provide kind of financial counseling as to how the organizations can talk to these companies and how companies can talk to these organizations. And Steve, you're a resource as well for this. The other Steve.
Yes.
And I would also,
Good.
I would just add, the model that Sean's trying to put together is sort of a good example of that, right? So by impact investing doesn't mean you lose your money, right? Mission related investment, some of it is charitable, but some of it you can have a double impact, right? Doing well while doing good. And the statistics, I happen to be general outside counsel to Impact Capital Managers, which is 100 impact investment funds. And their rates of return are very, very, very solid. And each of them have different strategies for making a positive impact.
I do think my question sort of falls into that side, which
Yeah.
is the issue I've had dealing with the family with a family office is unless it's a heartstring moment, unless some family member has et cetera, it's very hard to get the issues of the educated process. It's not that they're not interested in bioethics. I found people are, family offices are very interested in bioethics, only because it's doing good, it's a nice thing to do. But also they're interested in diversity, they're interested in returns. And where we have the problem is just trying to get people to understand what we're doing. Even a comparatively simple sort of medical device, there's a learning process that needs to take place. Is that something that you are prepared to help family offices with more generally. In terms of the fact that we all see that, I don't know about everyone else, I certainly have had my fair share of biotech companies come into our office and pitch me on the thing that is going to save humanity, and I'm sure they do, but I'm not a biomedical engineer. I'm not a chemist. And if I have a resource where I consider, is this actually worth impact philanthropic? Is that something that you guys?
Sean, why don't you talk about your cancer, the knowledge that you bring on cancer to that?
Sure. So, I mean, the beauty about our scientific community is that we talked about designing these projects. We have experts from every cancer center. So we can bring in the experts to evaluate, to help guide on the strategy behind it, because even within our internal teams, every disease is different. Tumors look different, stages look different, and there's experts so you really need these experts to bring in and say, we know the experts in every disease, and this is who you should be talking to for guidance. So
if I have someone comes into my office next week and goes, I've got this great business for curing cancer, this is what it is, I can give you a call and
Sure.
go, hi, these guys, I just want you to invest. This isn't impact, this is just straight.
Yeah. So we'll have to talk about, we'd have to work through the process of that because, we can't just field out all of this to the scientific community. But I think with our impact fund set up, this will give an opportunity to help streamline those processes. And then if it is the model through a PRI structure that Norm said with your office, that could also open up some doors from some guidance.
Just to add something to that, you mentioned medical devices. I think that these constructs seem to lend themselves better to drug development, longer term stuff that may have a more meaningful impact that fits more into the wheelhouse of what they're doing. But to your point, and I would ask Steve to comment after I make the following comment, there's no doubt that if a biotech indication or a cancer indication technology came into your office on the strength of an economic equity transaction, a convertible debt transaction, whatever it is, I would like to think that it could be reconfigured with the help of Mr. Cohen here to work within the confines of a mission funding, a collaborative effort with Stand Up to Cancer. There's no doubt that it could be operationally, it could be financially reprogrammed, for lack of a better term, to make it fit. Would that be a fair comment, Steve?
Yeah, but just keep in mind, and really, you don't have the domain expertise, right? I don't have the domain expertise. So we need that as part of the syndicate that's going to make the investment.
So,
Family office is probably how do we structure a deal in that transaction?
Right.
We're used to that, that's fine. And that's a financial world, and we have a problem. We know the experts.
By the way, if what they're bringing to the table is credible, there should be some type of reference to domain expertise within the company, because if they're bringing you a transaction in cervical cancer, there's got to be somebody that understands the technology well, has experience with it from a development point of view, from a marketing point of view. There's got to be, quote, domain expertise in the company. If so, the company comes to you and there is no obvious domain expertise supplemented by a scientific advisory board, partially supplemented by a board of directors, then maybe what you're looking at may not be as meritorious as you perceive. So that's just a cautionary comment.
Professor so-and-so from this university says this is the best thing in sliced bread. Professor so-and-so from University B says that it's also the best thing in sliced bread. I don't know who these guys are.
so the other point I would make, though, again, you're looking at this from an investment lens.
Yes.
Okay. Remember, family office has a private foundation. The private foundation has two pots of money. It's got the endowment money that it gives to people like you to make a lot of money for, and it's got program money. Mission capital comes out of the program money. Mission capital comes out of money that's going to go out the door as a grant. It's going to go out the door with little or no impact. It's going to go out the door with, in not any kind of collaborative effort. And so the whole point of what we're talking about is to find these foundations who have the mission. Okay, and that's not hard to do because whether it's cancer, whether it's neuro, whether it's cardio, whether it's a chronic or infectious disease, I mean, it's all there. The point is to get these wealth managers, and it's the wealth managers and it's the advisors to present the story to the family offices about how to use that philanthropic capital impactfully. And that doesn't mean you're giving it away. You're not throwing it out the window on the FDR drive. You're talking about making a serious funding that is going to make an impact and that will have a return. It's not an economic return as it would be for any kind of a unicorn investment, but it's a financial return. Marty?
Any other questions from the audience? We've been given the signal. We've got 5 minutes.
I just want to give a perspective here, which is that I think there's a couple different ways to slice this apple, right? So that's one perspective, right? I think there's different ways to approach the fund as well, you know, as well as the, you know, philanthropy, right? More like a Mike Milken approach, something like that. And I think that's what we're thinking about in terms of the fund, right? But I think in terms of, you know, the part that's cut out of what the philanthropy is going to invest. Yeah, there's definitely mechanisms we set up which allows for them to make money. And one of the challenges today is communicating out what your intent is, which has been very difficult. Let's face it. Even though we've spoken to 2,000 people or 3,000 people in the last year, you have, right? It's not easy to communicate it to the wealth manager or to, you know, this person in charge of philanthropy at a lot of family offices.
Well, they've never heard the story before, Marty. They've never heard. I mean, I'm shocked when I talk to very smart people who are running foundations, and I talk about program-related investments, and it's like, what is that? You know, that was created by the Ford Foundation 45 years ago. That allows foundations to do fundings, IRS-approved fundings to for-profit companies to advance the mission. This is not rocket surgery, but you know, thanks to you, we're getting the story out, and it's starting to resonate.
It's also a question of what the family wants, right? So in the family office, so different families have different goals. And if you have more types of input, right, you can better achieve the family impact. I had one, this is a strange one. So I had a family, very wealthy family, and they said that their goal was to provide support for people who got less than a 2.0 their first year of college, so that they can then become successful. Because obviously someone in the family did that. So every family is different. So it's listening to the family and trying to create what will provide the impact.
For that, were you? You weren't a candidate for that funding, were you? Great, thank you.
25 years of IRAC, ASF, Council on Foundations, Government Foundation, PRI has been around for a long time. One of the problems is you got to look at and say, okay, down the mile, you go to 3 places. You get people involved in the foundation center, you get people involved in the foundation, and you get people involved in the philanthropic piece of JP Morgan Bank. They're not like that. They're wealth, they're on that side. Then you say, okay, let's get the philanthropic people to present to the wealth managers in the offices, Merrill Lynch or the other places, about these 2 strategies. And then you articulate that, say, now go and talk to the families about what's down and it's a process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are there any other questions?
One last question.
Once, twice?
Yeah,
Yes.
over there.
Gentleman back there.
How can we use the philanthropic efforts to open up data, feed the AI, to make better insights and impact? How can we couple those things?
Steve wants to take that. That's your question. One more time.
How can we use the
Do you have an answer?
philanthropic efforts and donations, open up data, create better AI, that we make better impact?
So that's a very complex question because the AI is proprietary at a certain level. B, if the AI is going to be used as a subject matter of mission funding or Stand Up for Cancer, they're no doubt going to have to sign certain confidentiality agreements. And while they'll be able to disclose certain things, they'll not be able to disclose other things. So probably there may be public domain capability that can be disclosed, but you know, I work with a lot of IP tech transfer and licensing, and I'm going to tell you that if you want that kind of disclosure, you might not be able to have it to begin with, in AI particularly, because it's a very popular space. The IP is now very competitive, and any minor nuance that you develop or invent, you've got to spend 30 grand with a patent lawyer to see if it's not already been reserved or the subject of a published patent application, patent search. So it's becoming very difficult. I'm not sure that you can get a total data release out of what you're describing, given how much money's been invested in AI by investors, further development of AI for applications engineering downstream beyond the main investors. And then these guys may have proprietary contributions of their own. I don't know that you do or don't.
Yeah.
But so you've got 2 or 3 levels of confidentiality restrictions. So I'm not clear that that's a reality in a total sense. Did you want to comment on that?
We're struggling with that right now because part of our model that we pride ourselves on is speed. So dollars in the door, we launch projects because, you know, we don't value holding money. We want to get money out the door. We want to launch new innovative projects. So with speed and trying to have data sharing and all these things drastically slows down when you have multi-institutional projects. And sometimes there's a drug or a device that's tied to a company. So it is a huge obstacle and a huge headwind for us when our models build on speed and we want to have this sharing approach. So we are still working through that, but it is always a concern.
Okay,
Can
one
I-
last
can I
question.
just want to add one thought to that, if
Steve,
I
we don't
may.
have time for your answer.
One?
One more thought. We have to, just one
Okay,
last
sure.
question and that has to be it.
One last question.
Promise a super quick, super fast question. You brought up the term valley of death. You talked to 2,000 people. How many people know what you're talking about without having to explain the whole thing?
Let's have a hand raise.
I think anybody in venture capital knows what Valley of Death is.
Yeah.
but-
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to give you a further comment. I will in a few minutes on that. Okay, thank you,
Yeah, well, yeah.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.